So now we continue on line 666. Here Priam's son, Deiphobus, he found, whose face and limbs were one continued wound. Dishonest, with lopped arms the youth appears, spoiled of his nose and shortened of his ears. He scarcely knew him, striving to disown his blotted form, and blushing to be known, and therefore first began, O Teucer's race, who durst thy faultless figure thus deface? What heart could wish, what hand inflict this dire disgrace? 'Twas famed that in our last and fatal night your single prowess long sustained the fight, till tired, not forced, a glorious fate you chose, and fell upon a heap of slaughtered foes. But in remembrance of so brave a deed, a tomb and funeral honors I decreed. Thrice called your manes on the Trojan plains, the place your armor and your name retains. Your body too I sought, and had I found, designed for burial in your native ground. The ghost replied, Your piety has paid all needful rites to rest my wandering shade. But cruel fate and my more cruel wife to Grecian swords betrayed my sleeping life. These are the monuments of Helen's love, the shame I bear below, the marks I bore above. You know in what deluding joys we passed the night that was by heaven decreed our last. For when the fatal horse descending down, pregnant with arms, o'erwhelmed the unhappy town, she feigned nocturnal orgies, left my bed, and mixed with Trojan dames the dances led. Then waving high her torch, the signal made, which roused the Grecians from their ambuscade. With watching overworn, with cares oppressed, unhappy I had laid me down to rest, and heavy sleep my weary limbs possessed. Meantime my worthy wife our arms mislaid, and from beneath my head my sword conveyed. The door unlatched, and with repeated calls invites her former lord within my walls. Thus in her crime her confidence she placed, and with new treasons would redeem the past. What need I more? Into the room they ran, and meanly murdered a defenceless man. Ulysses, basely born, first led the way. Avenging powers, with justice if I pray, that fortune be their own another day. But answer you, and in your turn relate, what brought you living to the Stygian state? Driven by the winds and errors of the sea, or did you heaven's superior doom obey? Or tell what other chance conducts your way, to view with mortal eyes our dark retreats, tumults and torments of the infernal seats. While thus in talk the flying hours they pass, the sun had finished more than half his race, and they perhaps in words and tears had spent the little time of stay which heaven had lent. But thus the Sibyl chides their long delay. Night rushes down, and headlong drives the day. 'Tis here in different paths the way divides. The right to Pluto's golden palace guides, the left to that unhappy region tends, which to the depth of Tartarus descends, the seat of night profound, and punished fiends. Then thus Deiphobus, O sacred maid, forbear to chide, and be your will obeyed. Lo, to the secret shadows I retire, to pay my penance till my years expire. Proceed, auspicious prince, with glory crowned, and born to better fates than I have found. He said, and while he said, his steps he turned to secret shadows, and in silence mourned. So Aeneas finds a good friend, Priam's son Deiphobus, and he wonders why he is so disfigured. His arms are lopped off, his nose is all messed up, his ears have had bits of him cut off, and so he looks really grotesque. He barely recognizes him. He says, oh, what happened to you? Who could do such a thing? And Deiphobus recounts the tale. Well, Deiphobus, just a little backstory. When Paris died, several people wanted to marry Helen, and Deiphobus is the one who actually got to marry her. And so his worthy wife conspired to betray her husband Deiphobus in favor of Menelaus. And so the Trojan horse comes, and Helen pretends to go off with all of the celebrations, the nocturnal orgies, and when she comes back, she waves a torch which tells the Grecians to come in from their ambush points. And so Deiphobus has fallen asleep. He is all worn out, and Helen gestures that Menelaus should come and have his way with Deiphobus. And so Menelaus and Ulysses lead the way, and they murder this sleeping, defenseless man. But enough about my story. Tell me your story. How did you come to be here in Hades? And so they spend hours talking, and at least in Sybil's mind, they waste so much time that she chides them and says, "Hey, it's time to go. Stop talking." And we have two choices. We can go on the right to Pluto's Golden Palace, or on the left there you can see the entrance to Tartarus. And Deiphobus says, "Okay, I'll leave, and may your fate be more favorable than mine was." And then he goes. Picking up 739. The hero, looking on the left, espied a lofty tower, and strong on every side with treble walls, which Phlegethon surrounds, whose fiery flood the burning empire bounds. And pressed betwixt the rocks, the bellowing noise resounds. Wide is the fronting gate, and raised on high with adamantine columns threats the sky. Vain is the force of man, and heaven's as vain to crush the pillars which the pile sustain. Sublime on these a tower of steel is reared, and dire Tisiphone there keeps the ward, girt in her sanguine gown, by night and day, observant of the souls that pass the downward way. From hence are heard the groans of ghosts, the pains of sounding lashes and of dragging chains. The Trojans stood astonished at their cries, and asked his guide from whence those yells arise, and what the crimes and what the tortures were, and loud laments that rent the liquid air. She thus replied, "The chaste and holy race are all forbidden this polluted place. But Hecate, when she gave to rule the woods, then led me trembling through these dire abodes, and taught the tortures of the avenging gods. These are the realms of unrelenting fate, and awful Rhadamanthus rules the state. He hears and judges each committed crime, inquires into the manner, place, and time. The conscious wretch must all his acts reveal, loath to confess, unable to conceal, from the first moment of his vital breath to his last hour of unrepenting death. Straight o'er the guilty ghost the Fury shakes the sounding whip, and brandishes her snakes, and the pale sinner with her sisters takes. Then of itself unfolds the eternal door, with dreadful sounds the brazen hinges roar. You see before the gate what stalking ghost commands the guard, what sentries keep the post. More formidable Hydra stands within, whose jaws with iron teeth severely grin. The gaping gulf low to the center lies, and twice as deep as earth is distant from the skies. The rivals of the gods, the Titan race. Here, singed with lightning, roll within the unfathomed space. Here lie the Elean twins, I saw them both, enormous bodies of gigantic growth, who dared in fight the Thunderer to defy, affect his heaven, and force him from the sky. Sulmonius suffering cruel pains I found for emulating Jove, the rattling sound of mimic thunder, and the glittering blaze of pointed lightnings in their forky rays. Through Elis and the Grecian towns he flew, the audacious wretch 4 fiery coursers drew. He waved the torch aloft, and madly vain sought godlike worship from a servile train. Ambitious fool, with horny hoofs to pass o'er hollow arches of resounding brass, to rival thunder in its rapid course, and imitate inimitable force. But he, the King of Heaven, obscure on high, bared his red arm, and launching from the sky his writhen bolts, not shaking empty smoke, down to the deep abyss the flaming felon strook. There Tityos was to see, who took his birth from heaven, his nursing from the fruitful earth. Here his gigantic limbs with large embrace enfold 9 acres of infernal space. A ravenous vulture in his open side, her crooked beak and cruel talons tried, still for the growing liver digged his breast, the growing liver still supplied the feast. Still are his entrails fruitful to their pains, the immortal hunger lasts, the immortal food remains. Ixion and Pirithous I could name, and more Thessalian chiefs of mighty fame. High o'er their heads a mouldering rock is placed that promises a fall and shakes at every blast. They lie below on golden beds displayed, and genial feasts with regal pomp are made. The Queen of Furies by their sides is set, and snatches from their mouths the untasted meat, which if they touch, her hissing snake she rears, tossing her torch, and thundering in their ears. Then they, who brothers better claim to sown, expel their parents and usurp the throne, defraud their clients, and to lucre sold, sit brooding on unprofitable gold, who dare not give, and e'en refuse to lend to their poor kindred or a wanting friend. Vast is the throng of these, nor less the train of lustful youths for foul adultery slain, hosts of deserters, who their honor sold and basely broke their faith for bribes of gold. All these within the dungeon's depth remain, despairing pardon and expecting pain. Ask not what pains, nor farther seek to know their process or the forms of law below. Some roll a weighty stone, some laid along and bound with burning wires on spokes of wheel are hung. Unhappy Theseus, doomed forever there, is fixed by fate on his eternal chair. And wretched Phlegyas warns the world with cries, could warning make the world more just or wise? Learn righteousness, and dread the avenging deities. To tyrants others have their country sold, imposing foreign lords for foreign gold. Some have old laws repealed, new statutes made, not as the people pleased, but as they paid. With incest some their daughters' bed profaned. All dared the worst of ills, and what they dared attained. Had I 100 mouths, 100 tongues, and throats of brass inspired with iron lungs, I could not half those horrid crimes repeat, nor half the punishments those crimes have met. But let us haste our voyage to pursue. The walls of Pluto's palace are in view. The gate and iron arch above it stands on anvils labored by the Cyclops' hands. Before our farther way the fates allow, here must we fix on high the golden bough. All right, so this is the vision of Tartarus. This is a lengthy, dense section here. So we start with these treble walls, the threefold walls, which the river called Phlegethon surrounds. This is the river of fire. The columns are adamantine, meaning unyielding, and it's this terrifying place. It's ruled by Tisiphone, one of the Furies, and from Tartarus are coming these awful screams of anguish. And so Aeneas asks about it. Well, Deiphebe has actually been there once. Hecate showed her around, and so she knows what is there. Rhadamanthus was a wise king of Crete, and so he is in charge of hearing the crimes and judging what they deserve. And everybody has to confess everything they've ever done from birth to death. Nothing can be left out. And so you have a Fury sounding the whip, you have the Hydra, and beyond all of these, in the darkest depths of Tartarus, are the Titans. So we start with the Aeolian twins, these two giants who kidnapped Ares, and they are down there. You have Salmoneus down there, who pretended to be Jove himself, made the sound of thunder happen, and demanded that his people worship him as Jove, so displaying outrageous hubris. He was struck down by Jove with a writhen bolt, a twisted lightning bolt, and now he's in Tartarus. You have Tityus, who was actually a son of Zeus, and he was thrown with his mother into the earth, and so he was nursing from the foodful earth. Gaia actually gave birth to him, and he wanted to take Zeus's wife Leto for himself, and so obviously a big no-no. He has giant limbs because he was born of earth, and every day, this is kind of like Prometheus, every day a liver grows that a vulture eats out of him, and then his liver grows back and the vulture eats it again. So I don't want to say imagine this, but imagine this, right? Horrible, horrible suffering happening in this place. Ixion is somebody who killed his father-in-law, and then he was rescued by Zeus, who had pity on him, and then he tried to mate with Juno, and so big no-no, right? You have Pirithous, who attempted to marry Proserpina, obviously not okay either, and all of these others, and they are situated under this precarious boulder. Seems like it's going to fall any second, so you're just looking up at this boulder that is shaking. It seems like it's going to come loose, and in front of them is this wonderful, pleasant feast, and they are never allowed to eat it. The Queen of the Furies is right there, and if they touch it, she thunders in their ears and snatches it away and out of their mouths. And in Tartarus are all these different kinds of people who disown their brothers, people who throw their parents out, people who defraud their clients and don't give a cent of their treasures away. They don't lend it to people in need. They don't lend it to the poor. They keep it all for themselves. In Tartarus are those who commit adultery. In Tartarus are those who desert their people for money. And none of them expect anything but pain for all eternity. Some of them roll a weighty stone. Some are hung on spokes of a wheel. Some, like Theseus, are doomed to just sit forever. You have the wretched Phlegyas, who set the temple of Apollo Delphi on fire, and so he is suffering miserably, and he shouts to the world, if only they could hear, learn righteousness and dread the avenging deities. Never, ever make the gods upset with you. So the Sibyl lists a few other heinous crimes. People who betray their country to foreigners for money. Leaders who repeal old laws and then make statues just for themselves that nobody likes. So out with the old, in with the new, in a very impious way. All of these horrid things, and the Sibyl says, if I had 100 mouths and iron lungs that wouldn't give up on me, I could never speak of half of the awful things that have landed people in Tartarus and the awful punishments that are happening to them there. Well, she says, let's go ahead and move on. Let's go to Pluto's palace where we can give him the golden bough. And so they move on, line 861. She said, and through the gloomy shades they passed and chose the middle path. Arrived at last, the prince with living water sprinkled o'er his limbs and body, then approached the door, possessed the porch, and on the front above he fixed the fatal bough required by Pluto's love. These holy rites performed, they took their way where long extended plains of pleasure lay. The verdant fields with those of heaven may vie, with ether vested in a purple sky, the blissful seats of happy souls below. Stars of their own, and their own suns they know. Their airy limbs in sports they exercise, and on the green contend the wrestlers' prize. Some in heroic verse divinely sing, others in artful measures lead the ring. The Thracian bard, surrounded by the rest, there stands conspicuous in his flowing vest. His flying fingers and harmonious quill strike 7 distinguished notes, and 7 at once they fill. Here found they Teucer's old heroic race, born better times and happier years to grace. Assaracus and Elos here enjoy perpetual fame with him who founded Troy. The chief beheld their chariots from afar, their shining arms and coursers trained to war, their lances fixed in earth, their steeds around, free from their harness, graze the flowery ground. The love of horses which they had alive, and care of chariots, after death survive. Some cheerful souls were feasting on the plain, some did the song, and some the choir maintained beneath the laurel shade, where mighty Po mounts up to woods above, and hides his head below. Here patriots live, who for their country's good in fighting fields were prodigal of blood. Priests of unblemished lives here make abode, and poets worthy their inspiring God. And searching wits of more mechanic parts, who grace their age with new invented arts. Those who to worth their bounty did extend, and those who knew that bounty to commend. The heads of these with holy fillets bound, and all their temples were with garlands crowned. To these the Sibyl thus her speech addressed, and first to him surrounded by the rest, towering his height and ample was his breast. Say, happy souls, divine Musaeus, say, where lives Anchises, and where lies our way to find the hero for whose only sake we sought the dark abodes and crossed the bitter lake? To this the sacred poet thus replied, in no fixed place the happy souls reside. In groves we live, and lie on mossy beds by crystal streams that murmur through the meads. But past yon easy hill, and thence descend, the path conducts you to your journey's end. This said, he led them up the mountain's brow, and shews them all the shining fields below. They wind the hill, and through the blissful meadows go. But old Anchises in a flowery vale reviewed his mustered race, and took the tale, those happy spirits which ordained by fate for future beings and new bodies wait, with studious thought observe the illustrious throng in nature's order as they passed along, their names, their fates, their conduct, and their care, in peaceful senates and successful war. So they leave Tartarus, they quickly go by Pluto's temple, and they put the golden bough there, and then they have access to Elysium. And the verdant fields, these lush green fields there, contain all of the pleasures that Elysium has to offer. The happy souls, 871, are blissful there. They have their own stars and suns. They play sports. They wrestle. They sing and make poetry. The Thracian bard, which would be Orpheus, is surrounded by all these people as he plays the harp. These good kings, Assaracus and Elos, are there, and the founder of Troy, Dardanus, is there, and they're all on chariots. They're fighting with their swords. They're riding on horses because all the things they loved on Earth, they love here in the underworld. And it's just this wonderful place, especially after the horrors that were just witnessed and talked about from Tartarus. And here in Elysium, the patriots live, those who gave their life for their country, priests who lived unblemished lives, sin-free, poets who are inspired by the gods, those who invented new inventions for their cities, those who used their wealth generously. All of these kinds of people are here in Elysium. And Sibyl addresses Musaeus, who is the poet son of Orpheus, and says, hey, we're looking for Anchises. Can you point us to him? And the poet says, well, he could be anywhere. We have freedom here. We can go where we'd like, and there's so many happy places. But if you go over that hill right there, that's where your journey will end. And so they do, and we switch to Anchises' point of view, and he is doing this interesting thing. He is arranging all of these bodies that are waiting to go and be born on Earth. They will be great and famous, and we will meet them in this next section here, 921. He, when Aeneas on the plain appears, meets him with open arms and falling tears. Welcome, he said, the gods' undoubted race, O long expected to my dear embrace. Once more it is given me to behold your face. The love and pious duty which you pay have passed the perils of so hard a way. 'Tis true, computing times, I now believe the happy day approached, nor are my hopes deceived. What length of lands, what oceans have you passed? What storms sustained, and on what shores be cast? How have I feared your fate, but feared it most when love assailed you on the Libyan coast. To this the filial duty thus replies, your sacred ghost before my sleeping eyes appeared, and often urged this painful enterprise. After long tossing on the Tyrrhene sea, my navy rides at anchor in the bay. But reach your hand, O parent shade, nor shun the dear embraces of your longing son. He said, and falling tears his face bedew, then thrice around his neck his arms he threw. and thrice the flitting shadows slipped away, like winds or empty dreams that fly the day. Now, in a secret vale, the Trojan sees a separate grove, through which a gentle breeze plays with the passing breath, and whispers through the trees, and just before the confines of the wood, the gliding Lethe leads her silent flood. About the boughs an airy nation flew, thick as the humming bees that hunt the golden dew. In summer's heat on tops of lilies feed, and creep within their bells to suck the balmy seed. The winged army roams the fields around, the rivers and the rocks re-murmur to the sound. Aeneas wondering stood, then asked the cause which to the stream the crowding people draws. Then thus the sire: the souls that throng the flood are those to whom, by fate, our other bodies owed. In Lethe's lake they long oblivion taste, of future life secure, forgetful of the past. Long has my soul desired this time and place, to set before your sight your glorious race, that this presaging joy may fire your mind, to seek the shores by destiny designed. O Father, can it be that souls sublime return to visit our terrestrial clime, and that the generous mind, released by death, can covet lazy limbs and mortal breath? Anchises then, in order, thus begun to clear those wonders to his godlike son. Know first, that heaven and earth's compacted frame, and flowing waters, and the starry flame, and both the radiant lights, one common soul inspires and feeds, and animates the whole. This active mind, infused through all the space, unites and mingles with the mighty mass. Hence men and beasts the breath of life obtain, and birds of air, and monsters of the main. The ethereal vigor is in all the same, and every soul is filled with equal flame. As much as earthy limbs and gross allay of mortal members subject to decay, blunt not the beams of heaven and edge of day. From this coarse mixture of terrestrial parts, desire and fear by turns possess their hearts, and grief and joy. Nor can the groveling mind in the dark dungeon of the limbs confined assert the native skies, or own its heavenly kind. Nor death itself can wholly wash their stains, but long contracted filth e'en the soul remains. The relics of inveterate vice they wear, and spots of sin obscene in every face appear. For this are various penances enjoined, and some are hung to bleach upon the wind, some plunged in waters, other purged in fires, till all the dregs are drained, and all the rust expires. All have their manes, and those manes bear. The few so cleansed to these abodes repair, and breathe in ample fields the soft Elysian air. Then are they happy, when by length of time the scurf is worn away of each committed crime. No speck is left of their habitual stains, but the pure ether of the soul remains. But when 1,000 rolling years are past, so long their punishments and penance last, whole droves of minds are, by the driving god, compelled to drink the deep Lethean flood. In large forgetful draught to steep the cares of their past labors, and their irksome years, that, unremembering of its former pain, the soul may suffer mortal flesh again. Thus having said, the Father Spirit leads the priestess and his son through swarms of shades, and takes a rising ground from thence to see the long procession of his progeny. Okay, so Anchises sees Aeneas, and they have a sweet reunion. Anchises says in different ways, I have been waiting for this day. I have been waiting to see you, and I've been watching you from here, and I've been worried about your fate, especially when you are with Dido. And Aeneas responds, Oh, you've appeared to me so many times in my sleep. My fleet has gone through the sea and now is anchored in the bay at Cumae, and let me embrace you, Father. It's so good to see you. And he tries to give his father a big hug, and 3 times he cannot. Slips right through his father's visage. So Aeneas looks up, and he sees by the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness in Hades, all of these shades, these ghosts that are roaming around just like bees in the summer. And Aeneas wonders what exactly is going on, and so Anchises tells him, line 966, these are souls that are waiting for another body. Essentially, they're going to be reincarnated after they go through the Lethe, which means they will forget all of their past lives. And Aeneas responds, line 974, what? I didn't know that was possible. Is it really possible that souls from down here can come back to Earth? And so Anchises explains a couple things about at least Virgil's version of what this world is like. And so he wants Aeneas to understand, first of all, that there's one spirit, one common soul, 982, that gives life to all things, to the heavens, to the earth, to the waters, to the stars, to the sun and the moon. Everything comes from this one life-giving spirit. And so they all have the same sort of flame. And this is to say that if it comes from it once, then it can come from it again. And so what happens is all of the people who live are stained by the sin of their life. And they have filth, line 999, on them, and it remains even in death. And so they have to get rid of all of this, expunge it from themselves. And so they're plunged in waters, or they are purged through fire, but they all have their manes, their spirit of the dead. They all have the spirit, and they have to be in this spirit as they are cleansed. And then once they're cleansed, they can be in this Elysium. However, after 1,000 years, some of them will decide that they weren't satisfied in life, that they wanted more, and so they will go in the Lethe, and they will forget everything of who they were, and they will be born again. And so that's what this mass of spirits is. They're spirits that are in that position, and they will end up being descendants of Aeneas. So let's meet these descendants. 1025. Survey, pursued the sire, this airy throng. As offered to thy view they pass along. These are the Italian names which fate will join with ours and graph upon the Trojan line. Observe the youth who first appears in sight and holds the nearest station in the light. Already seems to snuff the vital air and leans just forward on a shining spear. Silvius is he, thy last begotten race, but first in order sent to fill thy place. An Alban name, but mixed with Dardan blood, born in the covert of a shady wood. Him fair Lavinia thy surviving wife shall breed in groves to lead a solitary life. In Alba he shall fix his royal seat, and born a king a race of kings beget. Then Procas, honour of the Trojan name, Capys and Numitor of endless fame. A second Silvius after these appears, Silvius Aeneas, for thy name he bears. For arms and justice equally renowned, who late restored in Alba shall be crowned. How great they look! How vigorously they wield their weighty lances and sustain the shield! But they who crowned with oaken wreaths appear shall Gabian walls and strong Fidena rear, Nomentum, Bola with Pometia found, and raise Collatian towers on rocky ground. All these shall then be towns of mighty fame, though now they lie obscure in lands without a name. See Romulus the Great, born to restore the crown that once his injured grandsire wore. This prince a priestess of your blood shall bear, and like his sire in arms he shall appear. 2 rising crests his royal head adorn, born from a god, himself to godhead born. His sire already signs him for the skies, and marks the seat amidst the deities. Auspicious chief, thy race in times to come shall spread the conquests of imperial Rome. Rome, whose ascending tower shall heaven invade, involving earth and ocean in her shade, high as the mother of the gods in place, and proud like her of an immortal race. Then, when in pomp she makes the Phrygian round, with golden turrets on her temple crowned, 100 gods her sweeping train supply, her offspring all, and all command the sky. Now fix your sight, and stand intent to see your Roman race, and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next behold the youth of form divine, Caesar himself, exalted in his line. Augustus, promised oft, and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold. African India shall his power obey, He shall extend his propagated sway beyond the solar year, without the starry way where Atlas turns the rolling heavens around, and his broad shoulders with their lights are crowned. At his foreseen approach already quake the Caspian kingdoms and Maeotian lake. Their seers behold the tempest from afar, and threatening oracles denounce the war. Nile hears him knocking at his sevenfold gates, and seeks his hidden spring, and fears his nephew's fates. Nor Hercules more lands or labors knew, not though the brazen-footed hind he slew, freed Erymanthus from the foaming boar, and dipped his arrows in Lernaean gore. Nor Bacchus, turning from his Indian war, by tigers drawn triumphant in his car, from Nisus' top descending on the plains, with curling vines around his purple reins. And doubt we yet through dangers to pursue the paths of honor, and a crown in view? Okay, so meet the Trojan progeny, the descendants of Aeneas. So we start with, we know that Ascanius is going to be the first king of Alba Longa, and so we're going to meet the next few kings. Silvius is one who's going to be born of Lavinia and is going to succeed Ascanius on the throne. Procus and Capys and Numitor, they're all kings of Alba Longa. Silvius Aeneas is the same, and they're going to make these amazing cities, and the Roman audience would know all of these cities. So all of these are going to be great Romans, and then Romulus the Great, 1055. He's born to a priestess, if you remember the story, and his sire in arms would be Ares or Mars, and he is going to be born from a god and then become a god himself. He was worshipped as Quirinus. So these are all great men that will come from Aeneas's line. And Anchises wants to encourage him that in times to come, this is your future, right? So be encouraged and keep on. Rome, that will come from you, will be as high as the mother of the gods. This is Cybele, the Phrygian mother goddess. And as she is so great and sees all of the worlds underneath her, so will it be with Rome. And then look at this young prince, the mighty Caesar. Caesar is exalted. He's the one that the world has been waiting for. His kingdom will stretch from Africa to India, even up to Atlas's domain, even to the heavens. The Caspian Sea, the Maeotian Lake, those would be near the Caspian and Black Seas in modern day. Even they will be afraid that he is coming to conquer them. The Nile of Egypt and his nephews, here again meaning descendants, 1092. They will all fear because Caesar Augustus is coming to conquer. Nobody had seen so much of the world as the Romans had taken over. Not Hercules, not even Bacchus, the god, had seen so much of the world. And so 1101 and 1102, Anchises is encouraging Aeneas that yes, there are dangers in the path of honor, but it's worth it. So we're actually going to jump back now. Caesar Augustus is so important, so incredible, that he's just rearing to be born. And so he kind of gets ahead of the rest of the line. So now we're going to go back to the first and second and third kings of Rome itself. Line 1103. But what's the man who from afar appears, his head with olive crowned, his hand a censer bears, his hoary beard and holy vestments bring his lost idea back? I know the Roman king. He shall to peaceful Rome new laws ordain, called from his mean abode a scepter to sustain. Him Tullus next in dignity succeeds, an active prince and prone to martial deeds. He shall his troops for fighting fields prepare, disused to toils and triumphs of the war. By dint of sword his crown he shall increase, and scour his armor from the rust of peace. Whom Ancus follows, with the fawning air, but vain within and proudly popular. Next view the Tarquin kings, the avenging sword of Brutus, justly drawn and Rome restored. He first renews the rods and acts severe, and gives the consuls royal robes to wear. His sons, who seek the tyrant to sustain and long for arbitrary lords again, with ignominy scourged in open sight, he dooms to death deserved, asserting public right. Unhappy man, to break the pious laws of nature, pleading in his children's cause. Howe'er the doubtful fact is understood, 'tis love of honor and his country's good. The consul, not the father, sheds the blood. Behold Tarquatus, the same track pursue, and next the two devoted Decii view. The Drusian line, Camillus loaded home with standards well redeemed, and foreign foes o'ercome. The pair you see in equal armor shine, now friends below in close embraces join. But when they leave the shady realms of night, and clothed in bodies breathe your upper light, with mortal hate each other shall pursue. What wars, what wounds, what slaughter shall ensue? From Alpine heights the father first descends, his daughter's husband in the plain attends. His daughter's husband arms his eastern friends. Embrace again, my sons, be foes no more, nor stain your country with her children's gore. And thou, the first, lay down thy lawless claim, thou of my blood, who bear'st the Julian name. Another comes, who shall in triumph ride, and to the Capitol his chariot guide, from conquered Corinth, rich with Grecian spoils. And yet another, famed for warlike toils, on Argos shall impose the Roman laws, and on the Greeks revenge the Trojan cause. Shall drag in chains their Achillean race, shall vindicate his ancestors' disgrace, and Pallas for her violated place. Great Cato there, for gravity renowned, and conquering Caucasus, goes with laurels crowned. Who can omit the Gracchi? Who declare the Scipios' worth, those thunderbolts of war, the double bane of Carthage? Who can see without esteem for virtuous poverty severe Fabricius? Who can cease to admire the ploughman consul in his coarse attire? Tired as I am, I praise the Fabii claim, and thou, great hero, greatest of thy name, ordained in war to save the sinking state, and by delays to put a stop to fate. Let others better mold the running mass of metals, and inform the breathing brass, and soften into flesh a marble face. Plead better at the bar, describe the skies, and when the stars descend and when they rise. But Rome, it is thine alone with awful sway to rule mankind and make the world obey, disposing peace and war by thy own majestic way. To tame the proud, the fettered slave to free, these are imperial arts, and worthy thee. All right, so the progeny continues, and we flash back from Augustus to the second king of Rome, following Romulus. So this would be Numa, and he is the founder of Roman religion as well. He ordained a lot of the priesthood and the Via Vesta and all of that. And then you have Tullus, who is the third king of Rome. You have Ancus, who's the fourth king. The Tarquins would be the Etruscan kings who were awful and evil, and they were overthrown by Brutus, just Brutus, who restored Rome to what it ought to have been. If you know Brutus' story, his sons rebelled and betrayed Rome, and they were discovered by Brutus. And so he puts them to public shame by executing them both. And Virgil seems to have mixed feelings about that. Yes, their death is deserved, but nature pleads for the children's cause, because a father should protect his children. And in this act, regardless of how people understand it, 1037, it's the consul, not the father, that sheds the blood. And then we get all these other Roman heroes, war generals, and consuls, and I won't go into detail about all of them, but we finally get this pair that you see in equal armor shine, 1134. And this is Caesar and Pompey. We know it's Caesar from 1146 there. The Julian name is one of them. So this is Julius Caesar, who is at civil war with Pompey. And this probably represents a lot of the civil wars that preceded Caesar Augustus and that ransacked Rome with chaos and tumult. And so Virgil enjoins them to stop, and really by the lips of Anchises. So the progeny continues with more war heroes. Mummius, who defeated the Achaean League, which was led by Corinth, and then Paulus, who instituted Roman law over Argos. You have Cato, you have Caucasus, and the Gracchi brothers. All these names are potentially familiar to you. One of my favorites that's mentioned is Fabii, who was an incorruptible consul, and Fabius Maximus is the one who George Washington really emulated in his battle tactics. He's the one that waited out Hannibal quite a bit, waiting for the perfect moment to strike and trying to cut off things strategically rather than facing him straight on. And so at the end of all of this, Anchises finally says, let other people do the artistic things. Rome, 1173. It is your awful sway to rule mankind. It is your job to dispose peace and war. It is your job to tame the proud and set the slave free. This is your duty, your fate, and it is only worthy Rome who can do this task. There's all of these wonderful figures in the progeny of Aeneas, but Aeneas, this is the point. Rome is going to be the greatest kingdom, the greatest empire to ever exist, and its job is too important, so don't give up. Continuing line 1178. He paused, and while with wondering eyes they viewed the passing spirits, thus his speech renewed. See great Marcellus, how untired in toils he moves with manly grace, how rich with regal spoils. He, when his country, threatened with alarms, requires his courage and his conquering arms, shall more than once the Punic bands affright, shall kill the Gaulish king in single fight, then to the capital in triumph move, and the third spoil shall grace for Eretrian Jove. Aeneas here beheld a form divine, a godlike youth in glittering armor shine, with great Marcellus keeping equal pace. But gloomy were his eyes, dejected was his face. He saw, and wondering, asked his airy guide, what and of whence was he, who pressed the hero's side. His son, or one of his illustrious name? How like the former, and almost the same! Observe the crowds that compass him around, all gaze and all admire, and raise a shouting sound. But hovering mists around his brows are spread, and night with sable shades involves his head. Seek not to know, the ghost replied with tears, the sorrows of thy sons in future years. This youth, the blissful vision of a day, shall just be shown on earth and snatched away. The gods too high had raised the Roman state, were but their gifts as permanent as great. What groans of men shall fill the Martian fields? How fierce a blaze his flaming pile shall yield? What funeral pomp shall floating Tiber see, when, rising from his bed, he views this sad solemnity? No youth shall equal hopes of glory give, no youth afford so great a cause to grieve. The Trojan honor and the Roman boast, admired when living and adored when lost. Mirror of ancient faith and early youth, undaunted worth, inviolable truth. No foe, unpunished in the fighting field, shall dare thee, foot to foot, with sword and shield. Much less in arms oppose thy matchless force, when thy sharp spurs shall urge thy foaming horse. Ah! couldst thou break through fate's severe decree, a new Marcellus shall arise in thee. Full canisters of fragrant lilies bring, mixed with the purple roses of the spring. Let me with funeral flowers his body strow. This gift with parents to their children owe, this unavailing gift at least I may bestow. Thus having said, he led the hero round the confines of the blessed Elysian ground, which when Anchises to his son had shown, and fired his mind to mount the promised throne, he tells the future wars ordained by fate, the strength and customs of the Latian state, the prince and people, and forearms his care with rules to push his fortune or to bear. 2 gates the silent house of sleep adorn, of polished ivory this, that of transparent horn. True visions through transparent horn arise, through polished ivory past deluding lies. Of various things discoursing as he passed, Anchises hither bends his steps at last. Then through the gates of ivory he dismissed his valiant offspring and divining guest. Straight to the ships Aeneas took his way, embarked his men, and skimmed along the sea, still coasting, till he gained Caieta's bay. At length an oozy ground his galleys moor, their heads are turned to sea, their sterns to shore. So finishing out the pageant of heroes, we have two Marcelluses. So the first Marcellus is a hero in the Second Punic War, and he is one of the few honored with the highest Roman military honor. And then there's the second Marcellus. Now, the second Marcellus is Caesar Augustus's nephew. It's Marcus Claudius Marcellus. He only lived for about 19 years. He is the son of his sister Octavia, and he died early. He was one of the possible successors to the throne, and the story goes that when Augustus heard Virgil reciting this, he broke down in tears because he was so moved by this tribute to young Marcellus, who he cared for a lot since he was his nephew as well. And so Anchises gives Marcellus the younger honor by strowing flowers on him. And then they talk a little bit more, and they start making their way towards the exit of Elysium. And he tells Aeneas of all the wars that are to come, what the Latian state is like, the prince and people there, and kind of what to expect and what to gear up for. Because, son, you need to make all of this fated greatness a reality. So keep on. Now, Virgil ends Book 6, which is the halfway point of the book, with this double exit to the underworld. So you have one exit, which is polished ivory, and through that, deluding lies pass. Through the other exit, this transparent horn, true visions passed. And so Anchises ushers Aeneas out the gate of polished ivory where deluding lies pass through. And so Aeneas sets out on the sea and quickly makes his way to Caieta's Bay, and he has the ships ready to go. The bows are pointed into the sea, and the sterns are on the beach. And thus ends the first half of Virgil's Aeneid.